So last week we had 5,000 folks in town for CUNA's GAC, and there were a lot of highlights. We had some great speakers on the stage, a lot of members of Congress, and of course our friends at the regulatory agencies addressed the crowd. And then on Wednesday and Thursday, everybody at the conference took to Capitol Hill to meet with members of Congress, and we covered just about every office on Capitol Hill and make sure the credit union message was spread. Our key ask in the House was for members to sign the Stiver-Schiff letter to the CFPB regarding the exemption authority. And the early indications are that those meetings were very successful. More than 70 members of the House of Representatives have agreed to sign that letter so far. We're going to try to get more this week. I think we will get more this week, and we'll have a very strong showing from Congress telling the CFPB, listen, we've given you this exemption authority so that your rules don't adversely impact how credit unions and community banks serve their members and customers. Use this authority so your rules will be targeted towards the bad actors. That's the message of the letter. We think it's consistent with what's in the law, and the meetings that we had last week went a long way to drive that home and generate support for that message in Congress. So right now, the key disconnect between the CFPB and the credit union system has to do with whether or not the Bureau has authority in the law to exempt credit unions from its rulemaking. Now, listen, we live in a world where I'm sure it'd be nice if credit unions were exempted from all the CFPB rulemakings. That's not exactly what we're seeking here. What we're seeking here is that when they do a rule like small dollar lending, or when they're considering mortgage lending where there are clearly bad actors in the marketplace and credit unions aren't among those bad actors, what we're seeking is that they tailor their rules so that the new requirements, the more burdensome requirements, fall on those that have been abusing consumers, and that credit unions continue to operate as they have, serving their members for many years. We believe that the Dodd-Frank Act gives the CFPB this authority. Under Section 1022, it says that the Bureau has the authority to exempt any class of covered person from its rule. And credit unions are certainly a class of covered persons under the Dodd-Frank Act. And so what we're trying to do is to get the CFPB to use that authority with greater alacrity so that credit unions can continue to serve their members just as they have all along. So right before the GAC took place, the comment period on NCUA's field of membership proposal closed. This set records in terms of the number of comment letters that NCUA has received. And you know, it's kind of like a broken record because we said the same thing at MBL and we said the same thing with risk-based capital. But for field of membership, more than 11,000 comment letters were received at the agency. So now what NCUA is doing is they're going through those comment letters, they're reading them, they're classifying them so that they can be taken into consideration as they finalize the rule. With 11,000 comment letters, it's going to take a little while for them to get all the way through that, but we're hoping in the next several months that they'll move towards finalizing this proposal, which we believe is going to help federal credit unions serve more communities, serve more consumers. And that's good for public policy, and it's good for the credit union system. So it's kind of a light week on Capitol Hill. Both the House and the Senate are in session, but the legislation that they're considering isn't directly relevant to credit unions. What we are following is a markup in the House Financial Services Committee on Wednesday. They're going to consider a number of bills, mostly that have come out of the Capital Markets Subcommittee, but there is a piece of legislation that we support at this markup. It's called the Taylor Act, and it's been introduced by Representatives Scott Tipton and Andy Barr. And what this legislation would do is it would require the federal banking regulators, including NCUA, to take an assessment of their rulemakings and to take into account the impact those rules have on institutions that are not systemically significant. Now, there are no credit unions that are systemically significant, so this is why it's of particular interest to us. So they take into account the impact of the rules on credit unions and then tailor them based on the risk profile of the institution. So smaller institutions generally have a lower risk profile. This is an important piece of legislation. It continues this notion that we've been trying to push, that in coming out of this financial crisis, where you have these consumer regulations that are certainly targeted towards the abusers of consumers, but you also have prudential regulation that is designed to address too big to fail. Well, credit unions aren't too big to fail, and they shouldn't be subject to the same type of too big to fail regulations that the largest banks are. So this legislation will be in the committee this week. We've supported it since it was introduced, and we'll be working with the sponsors to try to get it through the House and hopefully into law.